Recently, the annual TED conference took place in Long Beach, California. Now, I've long recommended its famous 18-minute TED Talks. Check out TED.com/talks. They cover a wide range of topics, including science, technology, design, business, global issues. And they have recurring themes of inspiration and challenge and optimism, not unlike what I try to do with this radio show. Now, on opening day at the recent conference, they scheduled 2 talks, one right after the other. The first, by Paul Gilding, was entitled "The Earth is Full," and it asked questions like, have we used up all our resources? Have we filled up all the livable space on Earth? And Gilding suggests that we have, with the possibility of devastating consequences. But in a talk that's equal parts terrifying and oddly hopeful, he also says, quote, "It takes a good crisis to get us going. When we feel fear and we fear loss, we are capable of quite extraordinary things." Now, that talk was followed by one by today's guest, Peter Diamandis, entitled "Abundance is Our Future," in which he makes the case for optimism, that we'll invent, innovate, and create ways to solve the challenges that loom over us. I'm going to quote him now. "I'm not saying we don't have our set of problems. Climate crisis, species extinction, water and energy shortage, we surely do, but ultimately we knock them down. Since the dawn of humanity, a privileged few have lived in stark contrast to the majority. Conventional wisdom says this gap cannot be closed, but according to the new book by Diamandis and co-author Stephen Kotler, it is closing, and fast. In the book Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, they document how progress in artificial intelligence, robotics, infinite computing, ubiquitous broadband networks, digital manufacturing, nanomaterials, synthetic biology, and many other exponentially growing technologies are going to enable us to make greater gains in the next 2 decades than we have in the previous 200 years. And they believe that we will soon have the ability to meet and exceed the basic needs of every man, woman, and child on the planet." Peter Diamandis, an entrepreneur turned philanthropist, is chairman and CEO of the X Prize Foundation, which designs and launches large incentive prizes to drive radical breakthroughs. Best known for the 10 million Ansari X Prize for private spaceflight, the foundation is now launching prizes in exploration, life sciences, energy, and education. Diamandis is also the co-founder and executive chairman of Singularity University, which teaches graduates and executives about exponentially growing technologies and their potential to address humanity's grand challenges. As I said, Diamandis recently co-authored Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think. Welcome, Peter Diamandis.
My pleasure to be here.
I like listeners to get a feel for the people behind the work and the ideas that we talk about. So could you briefly talk about your path to the work that you do today? And feel free to cite mentors, turning points, moments of decision.
Sure. I was born in the Bronx, actually, New York. My parents were both immigrants from Greece. My dad went to medical school. First time he left the island of Lesbos, where he was born, went to medical school in Athens. My mom came here when she was 10. And I grew up in a family that was really about professionals, about working hard. Work ethic was everything. And it was sort of agreed as a child I'd be going to medical school, and I sort of bought the picture. But then, Apollo came along and Star Trek, and my passions, my sort of inner purpose in life was opening up the space frontier. And so I announced, I think around the age of 10 to my mom that I was going to become an astronaut, and she said, "Well, that's nice, son, but you're going to become a doctor." And of course, I needed to pursue both careers, and ended up going to MIT as an undergrad and studied molecular biology there. Started my first space organization my second year at MIT, which is now a global college space organization called Students of Exploration and Development of Space. Went on to start a university called International Space University, which is doing extraordinarily well, based in Strasbourg, France. A launch company, a company called Zero G, co-founded a company called Space Adventures. Ended up going to medical school, got my degree, never practiced, had 2 companies going my 4th year of medical school. I was a sort of a serial entrepreneur with a passion towards space and sort of wanted to make my parents happy and go to medical school.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to see that. It just sort of thrown in and Harvard Medical School.
I learned early on that if you really truly can connect with your passions and do something that you love and you care about, that you can ultimately work hard enough and make it happen. And I've done that. Started a dozen companies in the space and high-tech realm, and have watched extraordinary people have bigger impact over these last few decades. And it's watching these individuals as entrepreneurs and philanthropists really set out with audacious goals and achieved them that has really inspired me. And what I've seen is it's easier and easier to achieve big goals now more than ever.
Okay, and thus this book.
That's this book, yes.
But let's talk first about the X Prize for people to whom that's somewhat new. What has been accomplished so far, and what is in the near future?
So, I mean, the X Prize was
and explain, how the mechanism works.
So, I was interested in flying into space, as I said, since my childhood, and I had started a number of space companies. I knew it was really not an easy business to build launch vehicles, and around 1994 or so, a great friend of mine, Greg Marinak, gave me a copy of Lindbergh's book, The Spirit of St. Louis. And in this, I had no idea Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic to win a prize, and found out that he did. And I started studying prizes as a mechanism to really drive breakthroughs in the world, and in particular, the breakthrough of opening up spaceflight for all of us to have a chance to go. Because my mission was not just to go myself, which I very much want to, but to take others with me. And I started studying prizes, came up with the idea of a $10 million prize to create a new generation of private spaceships. Long story short, that prize was launched in '96 under the Arch. 8 years later, 26 teams, 7 countries around the world spent $100 million. Burt Rutan, the Mojave Desert, backed by Paul Allen, makes the flight, in fact, 2 flights to 100 kilometers altitude in 2 weeks, and wins the $10 million prize and opens up a private spaceflight business.
Yeah, and as I shared with you off the air before we started, I was actually out in the Mojave for that first flight. A couple of friends of mine from the East Coast said, "We're flying out. Want to go with us?"
Yeah, it was a great, with 30,000 people from around the world came in for that historic event. Richard Branson bought the rights to the winning technology, and now there's Virgin Galactic where you can go and buy tickets for just a couple $100,000 a pop.
And the thing that most struck me about that was that my mom worked for NASA. I grew up in Brevard County, right outside I worked at Cape Kennedy after my senior year in high school and after my freshman year in college. The distance that you were from what was really happening at Cape Kennedy Cape Canaveral was noticeable. Here, I was, there was a chain link fence about 6 feet tall. I was behind that, and he lands.
You're 100 times closer. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And
just something about that.
On the heels of that, so we with that X Prize, we set out a $10 million purse for the first team who could build a spaceship carrying 3 adults up into space, land, and do it again within 2 weeks. And what was incredible was not only that Burt Rutan and his team, backed by Paul Allen, pulled it off, but they did it with 30 engineers. So literally in a garage. And they were able to use existing modern technologies, of new materials and CAD capability, software companies like Autodesk, to literally design a spaceship in your garage and fly it into space. And that ability for this new generation of DIYers, do-it-yourself innovators, using this powerful technology is part of what I speak about in my new book, Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think. That, if you have a dream, if you care about doing something big in the world, you're now more empowered than ever before to do that. In fact, as empowered as governments and large corporations used to be, and I give example after example in Abundance about the techniques and the people and the technologies that enable you to go and change the world and create the world that you desire.
Yeah, and what you're saying, and I'm going to tell people in a second who you're listening to, but what you're saying is that these new technologies, and there's also in some ways new cultures, actually make what you're talking about easier than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, etc. What's in the future for the X Prize?
Well, we have decided on the success of the Ansari X Prize to really launch competitions in a range of fields, really about creating breakthroughs that are of benefit to humanity. So we're doing it in exploration, space and oceans, life sciences, energy and environment, and education and global development. I was just giving the opening keynote with Paul Jacobs, CEO of Qualcomm, and the Qualcomm Foundation and X Prize have partnered to create the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize. It's $10 million for the first team who can build a mobile handheld device that any consumer can use to diagnose themselves better than a board-certified doctor. And really, it's the notion that today we can bring the technology of Star Trek to life. Tricorder was the device in Star Trek that Bones, Dr. McCoy, Spock used to diagnose individuals. And this is going to have teams combine artificial intelligence, lab on a chip, digital imaging, cloud computing, so that you can literally talk to your phone, you can cough on it, you can do a finger blood prick, you can do DNA or RNA analysis of any bacteria or viruses in your cough. I mean, we're living in an incredible world where this is possible. It will transform healthcare.
Well, the cool thing about it not only is the portability of it and the usability of it, but the fact that what healthcare has been so slow to do, which is electronically gather its information and share it, is automatic with this device, right?
Absolutely. So, it's amazing. When you think about the future of medicine, and I talk about healthcare as one of the areas in abundance that people will be transformed, and why people should be so extraordinarily excited about the future of healthcare. Well, here's the facts. Today, Rand Corporation did a study that said 45% of the time you go to the doctor, you get the wrong diagnosis or the wrong course of treatment. I mean, my God, that's a coin flip. That's incredible.
You could do as well going to Lucy Van Pelt.
Yeah. I mean, if those numbers are really true, that's scary. Add to that by 2020 in the United States alone, we're going to be short 91,000 doctors. I mean, there's no way to train that many doctors in the next 8 years. And if you think that's bad compared to the rest of the world, Africa has 25% of the disease burden, but only 1.3% of the healthcare workers. So it's the only way we're going to actually provide abundant healthcare is with devices like the tricorder that is available to almost anyone. If you're a mom at home at 2 o'clock in the morning, I have 2 8.5-month-old twins, 2 boys born and thank goodness happy and healthy. But 2 o'clock in the morning, if they're sick, you're scared. I mean, what do? You go to the ER and you go to the emergency room and you find out it's the common cold. Well, you've just used the system in the wrong way. You've taken up time and capacity from someone who could be deathly ill. We have an overloaded system already. The tricorder can tell you, by the way, they're fine, drink fluid, stay home. And in the developing world, these devices will become the local village doctor. And if they sequence an RNA or DNA virus or bacteria they don't recognize, they call the CDC. And you're preventing a pandemic from happening in the first place. Transformative stuff.
In case anyone missed that means, okay, you're testing it out in a village somewhere. You don't even have to know what happened, but the machine reads a virus it hasn't seen before. That information goes to the CDC, and the first case gives us an alert rather than a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later when it's too late.
Exactly. And so we're living, that's the potential. And so in the book, in the first force, I talk about exponential technologies, and you named these. First it's infinite computing. My friends at Autodesk refer to that cloud computing, infinite computing. It's the notion that any one of us can have access to hundreds or thousands of computers at our whim because of how things have been structured. It used to have to be the chairman of the computer science department at MIT to have access to more than a single computer. And now we take these things for granted. Add to that artificial intelligence, the sort of thing powering your iPhone 4S, the Siri, personal agent. It's only going to get better and better. And where you have an AI that you can talk to, an artificial intelligence, and you can ask questions of. And, this kind of capacity is what was used last year to win Jeopardy, where IBM's Watson computer went up against Jeopardy, against the best, the two-time winners, the all-time winners of Jeopardy. And it vanquished them. It was, so much better than they were at understanding the human language and gaining access to the knowledge and answering it correctly. I mean, imagine this kind of artificial intelligence on the cloud, available to anyone with a cell phone, that a kid who has a question about math or about history can ask any question and have it answered in a way and where the computer understands what is this kid's language capabilities, what language they speak, what's the vocabulary, what sports stars and movie stars does it like, what colors does it like, and it answers in a way that you care about, using examples that inspire you. I mean, this is a tremendous future, and it scales not to hundreds or thousands, it scales to billions.
Yeah, you've pointed out how many cell phones.
So as an example,
now and 10 years from now.
So in 2009 we had 28% cell phone penetration in Africa. It's going to be, in the developing world, it's going to be exceeding 70% penetration by the end of 2013, which means that we'll have, 5 to 7 billion cell phones on the planet that are connected on the internet. And if you think about that, a Maasai warrior in the middle of Kenya today on a cell phone has better mobile communications than President Reagan did 25 years ago. And if they're on a smartphone, they have better access to knowledge and information than President Clinton did 15 years ago. They're living in a world of information, communications, abundance. It's amazing stuff. And, I make all of this information available in the book to get people excited about the potential. In fact, if you're interested, you can download the first chapter of the book for free at the book website, which is abundancethebook.com. Download the first chapter, learn about where humanity is going, how this will transform your lives, your kids' lives, your business, your industry, and create the potential for an amazing world going forward.
Well, I think also you read just the first chapter. What it may transform first is your outlook.
Yeah,
because
the reality is that most of us get depressed as we listen nonstop to all the negative news coming on the media. But you've got to remember the old adage from the newspapers: if it bleeds, it leads. The media differentially feeds us negative stories, not you, but most media, because that's what our brain is evolutionarily designed to listen to.
We're going to go into that brain science in just a second. I just want to remind people I'm Terrence McNally. That's the voice of Peter Diamandis, chairman of the X Prize Foundation. He's co-author with Stephen Kotler of Abundance. The Future is Better Than You Think. And just one thing for anyone who says, what does he know? I just want to say the book, the final 113 pages are references and footnotes. I don't know if you were aware of that, from page 243 to page 356.
So, the best way for me to shine light onto people's pessimism is to give them the facts. And so Stephen Kotler and I spent a tremendous amount of time really going out and gathering all of the data and the facts and presenting it in the charts, in the graphs, in the footnotes, so that anybody can check this. I mean, I've gone to the best of the best at MIT, at Harvard, at United Nations, around the world to get the data that led to the conclusions. The fact is we're immune to the good news. We don't hear it when it comes over the equation, but we listen to the bad.
Right. And the websites to learn more are Diamandis.com, Diamandis, Diamandis.com, or abundancethebook.com. Yeah, let's talk about this brain science, because to me, that was really empowering in a funny way. In other words, what you say is that we are basically hardwired, the human brain, hardwired for bad news, hardwired to not notice good news. The brief reason is you miss a piece of good news, you're still around. You miss a piece of bad news, maybe you're not. But tell us about how they've learned this and what it means.
Sure. So, and I talked about this in my TED Talk. I opened up with about 25 seconds of fast-paced negative news clips over the last 6 months. And I said, I could have put together the same negative news clips in the last 6 days or the last 6 years. The fact of the matter is that the media differentially feeds us negative stories, and there's a very good reason for this. That's what we pay attention to. And the reason we pay attention to is that nothing is more important to humanity, to humans and your brain, than survival. And because of that, every second of every day, Terrence, you and I are bombarded by way too much sensory information than we can possibly process. All of the stuff coming into our ears, our eyes, our senses, you can't process. In fact, you process a fraction of that data. So all the data makes us stop first to an ancient sliver of your temporal lobe called the amygdala. And the amygdala is your early warning system. It scours and it sorts through all of the data looking for anything that can harm you. It looks at, squiggly line on the ground. It thinks snake. A rustle in the leaves and the bushes. It thinks tiger. And, the 0.1% of the time that it was a snake or a tiger and you were fearful, it would save your life. 99% of the time it wasn't. Who cares? So because of that, it puts you on high alert. So given a dozen news stories, you're going to pay attention to the negative news. And the fact of the matter is that the news media takes advantage of that. And if it bleeds, it leads. And so if you go do this experiment for yourself, open up the New York Times, the LA Times, and look at the stories, you'll find it, 90% negative stories. Is it true that's all that's going on in the world? Of course not. But people will look at that. They'll be worried about the economic crises, the wars in towns you've never heard of or been to. because that's what readers focus in on. And there is a Nobel laureate, Daniel Kahneman, who discovered that we have a lot of cognitive biases. We're biased. We have a negativity bias. We give more credence to negative news, again, for the same reasons.
Now, isn't it, I mean, just so people can relate to this in their own lives, this is that same thing of that you go to a meeting, a business meeting, whatever, and 95% of it is good, and there's one critical comment, there's one part of your report they didn't like, when you leave, that's what you're thinking about.
What you're thinking
about. It's
what
we notice, and it's what we obsess about.
Yeah, and so it's the facts, and it's liberating when you can realize that, okay, maybe I should focus on the good news. This is where your upper brain functions, the small, thin layer of the human cortex that's evolved over the last few 100,000 years, come into focus, because it's your animal brain that is really wired for the negative news attention, and it's the thin, top of your cortex that's able to process the good news.
And so if you don't put it into practice, if you don't actually take some control, take some agency, as they will, in what comes in and what you pay attention to, you will, by default, do just what you've been doing for a million years.
And I do it, and I sit there and going, I can't believe I've fallen for that again, over and over again. And so this book is to say, listen, we know that the last century has been a lot better. I mean, sure, there was lots of things. There was World War I and World War II and the Spanish flu epidemic. I mean, 110 million people died between the Spanish flu and World War II. But the fact of the matter is that the survival rate of children have gone up 10x. We've had a tenfold decrease in childhood mortality. Cost of food has come down 13-fold. Global literacy, the ability of people to read, has gone from 25% to 80% around the world in the last 130 years. We're living in the most peaceful time ever in human history. The cost of energy has come down 20-fold. The cost of transportation 100-fold. The cost of communication 1,000-fold. Amazing progress we don't think about. I'll give you this example. People today below the poverty line in the United States, they'd have real troubles. They're working hard. They're slammed. But people below the poverty line today, 2/3 of them have electricity, flushing toilets, running water, air conditioning, phones, refrigerators, cars, cell phones. These are the things that the wealthiest robber barons and emperors in the last century didn't have.
That Jules Verne fantasized about.
But the poorest of the poor,
have
people
below
the poverty line, still have them. We raise the levels, we raise our expectations, and we redefine what poverty means today.
Yeah. I do want to, let me just ask, as long as we're talking, because that's one that some people's, sensors are going to go up. Inequality is still a huge issue, whether it's inequality, which we've seen growing in the U.S., inequality around and are you familiar with the book, The Spirit Level?
I'm not.
Okay. A couple of epidemiologists actually looked at 30 years of research. Same kind of thing you did. I mean, they really went and looked at everything. What they found was that the countries that have the greatest equality, Sweden, Japan, and so on, score better on most things, whether it's health, madness, crime, etc., even patents. And the countries that have the most inequality score the poorest. So it seems to me that one piece that's in here is an inequality. How is that doing?
So we have to define equality two different ways. One is to say I have as much money as another person. The other is to say I have access to basic capabilities equally to anyone else. My book, Abundance, is not about making everybody of equal wealth. Okay? It's about giving everybody on the planet access to the basics that they need. It's giving people not a life of luxury, but a life of possibility.
Right.
So the question is, how do we give 7 billion people growing to 9 billion people? We could talk about population growth in a moment. How do we give those people access to water, energy, healthcare, education, food, shelter, freedom, information. I mean, so these are the things, and cell phones have already done this to a great degree in information communications. It's given everybody almost equal playing field. I mean, my cell phone coverage and my ability to gain access to Google is equal to, the poorest person with a smartphone in Africa.
Right.
They don't have less of a Google capability than I do, or less ability to call people. I mean, so we've been put on a level playing field in that regard. Let's talk about energy and water, but I want to give an example first. In the book, in fact, the cover of the book, my wife, Kristen, designed, is it's an aluminum cover. It's wrapped in aluminum, or at least something that looks like aluminum. And I open with a story of aluminum, and in particular a story of Napoleon III. So it's in the mid-1800s. Napoleon III has invited the King of Siam over for dinner. And Napoleon's troops are fed with silver utensils. Napoleon himself eats with gold utensils, but the King of Siam is fed with aluminum utensils. And people go, huh? Well, it turns out aluminum was the most precious metal on the planet back in the mid-1800s. And it's why the capstone, the tip of the Washington Monument, is made of aluminum. It turns out that even though the Earth is 8.3% aluminum by weight, pure aluminum doesn't exist in nature. All of the aluminum is bound with oxygen and silicates to form bauxite. It was so difficult to purify pure aluminum out of bauxite that it was so scarce it was worth more than platinum and gold. And then this technology of electrolysis came along, invented both in the U.S. and France at the same time. And electrolysis made aluminum so cheap, we use it with throwaway mentality right now. When's the last time you thought a second about throwing away an aluminum can or a piece of aluminum that you wrapped your food in? And it's now gone from something that was scarce to something that is abundant. And so in the book, I talk about these examples. I say, we talk about energy scarcity. Well, as a human race, we use 16 terawatts of energy. But
per what?
Per year for the population.
Okay.
And but 5,000 times as much energy hits the Earth from the sun every year. We have plenty of energy on this planet. It's just not in an accessible form. 88, as much energy as we use in the human race in a year hits the Earth's surface from sunlight in 88 minutes. So the question is, how do we go from using that energy which is out there to making it accessible and convertible to usable form, just like aluminum went from being scarce and inaccessible to accessible? And that technology is coming online in the form of solar breakthroughs. Last year, solar dropped in cost by a factor of 2. We dropped 50% in price.
Is that globally?
Globally. As an example, solar electricity in India, it's now you can get electricity from solar at 50% the cost of diesel-generated electricity, 8.8 versus 17 rupees. Amazing stuff. And MIT just released a study saying that by 2020, the cost of solar in the United States is going to be 6 cents a kilowatt hour, compared to a national average of 15 cents a kilowatt hour for all other electricity. So huge potential.
Oh, and by the way, that 6 cents is in certain parts of the country where
it's in the sunny
Southwest
part. Yes.
and so on.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me shift for a second. I opened up, Peter, by talking about the TED Talks that
right.
Paul Gilding goes on opening afternoon. I think Chris Anderson of TED knew what he was doing. He knew he'd get some buzz with this, so he puts on Paul Gilding with the Earth is full, and then follows with you. What happened? In other words, as I said at the top for anyone who's tuned in late, Paul Gilding said, we're kind of we're running out of resources, running out of space to dispose of them. It's an emergency. He also said that humans have a tendency that when faced with an emergency, they come through. And so it is time. This is what I'm saying. It's time for extraordinary shifts, extraordinary action. You then come on and say, hey, everything's better than it's ever been. First, my question is, I know that after that, I wasn't there. After that, they had the two of you on stage. They sort of had a little bit of a debate. And so what happened there?
Well, you can imagine Paul and I had a number of conversations, and in the elevators, I had overhearing someone say, "Are you a Peter or a Paul?" Meaning, are you an optimist?
We were back in the Bible.
It was very interesting conversations. And, the funny thing is, and a lot of people recognize this, is that we didn't really disagree on things.
That was certainly going to be my point.
We have serious issues, and Paul's point was, listen, the only time that the government really takes, or that large corporations take action, is when literally things are so broken that your
survival's at stake. Right?
Yeah, survival's at stake, and so I do agree that I don't count on the government to take action unless survival is at stake in this regard. But what my point is, rather than saying, hey, it's game over, sit back and, relax and watch the ride. My point is that while the government or large corporations may not take action until it's, really on the 9th or the 11th hour, we as individuals and entrepreneurs and DIY innovators and techno-philanthropists, the wealthiest individuals, are taking action and are more empowered ever than before. And I can imagine that the technologies and nanomaterials and AI and robotics and synthetic biology are allowing individuals and small teams to do transformative things, to touch the lives of 1 billion people. And the real innovation for these breakthroughs are not going to come out of government. I don't think. Listen, the government does a lot of great stuff. I was just with the head of DARPA, and I have huge respect for DARPA. Right? I have huge respect for different parts of NASA as well, who do great work. I just think that the true breakthroughs come from individuals and small teams who are willing to risk everything, risk their reputation, their wealth, to try out the ideas that are a crazy idea. Because, the day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. And where in our government areas and where in our large corporations do we try ideas that have a high likelihood of failing? And the problem is that the less we do that, the more likely we're able to innovate. And so innovation truly comes out of small teams and these innovators. And then the government and large corporations take these things to scale. I was mentioning Dean Kamen's Slingshot, a device that he's built that's the size of a small dorm room refrigerator that's able to purify water in an extraordinary fashion. You put one hose into anything that's wet, salt water, the latrine, arsenic-infected water, and out the other hose comes water so pure that you can literally inject it. And it generates 1,000 liters a day for less than 2 cents a liter, for less than 100 watts, less than the electricity of a hairdryer.
Okay, that is a phenomenal thing. What stage are we in that technology right now?
So Dean had been working on this for a decade. He's had these prototyped and in a dozen of these machines in a number of cities. And what I was able to announce with his permission the morning I spoke at TED is that he has a partnership with Coca-Cola, with support from the chairman of Coca-Cola, to do a field trial of some hundreds of these units. And if the field trial works, the chairman has said, I'm going to take this to all 208 countries where we distribute Coca-Cola. Now, that's a game changer, and it's a perfect example of a innovator, a real DIY, do-it-yourself technologist using exponential technologies to have a breakthrough, where the breakthrough came out of Dean and his small team, but a large corporation like Coca-Cola and maybe other governments may support.
Oh, I mean, if it works, you can imagine.
Yeah, but he's had this for a while, and it's why hasn't this been distributed sooner? It's frustration, and I've been basically saying to every billionaire and company I know, listen, if I had the capital, I'd be rolling this stuff out. It's transformative, but that's one example of hundreds or thousands of other examples, and it's the world we're living in today. Yes, we have big problems, but the power and technology for innovators to knock down those problems has never been stronger.
Let me just ask a quick question about that Coca-Cola thing. Are they? I mean, I'm not looking for a signed contract. Are they saying we'll mean that all of our bottling plants will now use this, or are they actually saying we'll make this widely available?
What I can say is that again, if this technology passes this extensive field trial, not of a dozen units, but a few hundred units, and I don't know exactly how many, what Dean has said is that the chairman of Coke, who I have tremendous respect for, will distribute this in 200 plus countries that will touch the lives of billions of people. I mean,
okay,
and these devices have, they're built to be as simple as possible, where they can go 5 years without any maintenance. And, these cost a few $1,000s. I mean, it's a game changer.
No, it is really, because when people talk about the future, it seems to me, they talk about energy and water as the crisis points, as the limiting factors, right? And this one can handle water.
And if you realize that half of the disease burden of the world is due to unclean water, where you have bacterial, viral, and parasite vectors. I mean, you could knock out half the disease burden of Africa.
So now you're not just talking about people having the water they need to live. You're now talking about also eliminating huge amounts of disease.
And they become more productive.
That's right.
And healthier.
Now
and they
people
live longer.
can go to school and people can, I mean, all these things happen.
And so let me translate that to the next thing, which in the book I talk about the fourth force towards abundance I call the rising billion. So in 2010, we had about just under 2 billion people connected on the internet. By 2020, in 8 years' time, we're going to be going to 5 billion people connected on the internet. 3 billion new minds are coming online. These are 3 billion people.
And what was that span? Was that
in the next 8 years?
8 years, okay.
You know, we're at the knee of the curve.
So we're doubling.
We're more than doubling the number of people connected to the internet. And the notion is that 3 billion people who've never been heard from before are going to be now connected. What do they want? What are they going to invent? What are they going to consume? What are they going to, what are
they going to imagine?
Imagine, absolutely. Yeah. It's a huge force for abundance. First of all, these people are going to become consumers of American goods. And people say, oh, my goodness, I mean, they're making $5 a day or $10 a day. But do the math. $5 or $10 a day times 365 days a year times 3 billion people is tens of trillions of dollars being pumped into the global economy, and they're going to become healthier and better educated, and the amount of money they're going to make is going to increase, and they're going to have access to infinite computing and 3D manufacturing. They're going to become productive. We're talking about really a new world we're living into.
Yeah. Now, one of the things one of the things a concept that I haven't mentioned is this concept of leapfrogging. For people who haven't thought of that, I mean, what you're saying with the cell phones in Africa, or the cell phones in any place that's been poverty-stricken, they skipped wiring the whole country, right? And just tell people a little bit that concept of leapfrogging, because if you haven't thought about it, it makes a light bulb go off.
So go outside, look around, and what you'll see on your skyline are telephone poles, lots of telephone wires. We are living in a wired nation, and we invested, hundreds of billions of dollars wiring this our great nation for telephony. Africa leaped over that entire wire generation, and all they have is cell phones. But their cell phones are every bit as advanced as us. In fact, many people in Africa do all their banking.
Right, they went to that before
us. They leapfrogged, and you're going to start to see, basically the cell phone become the basis for education, the basis for healthcare, the basis for earning a living, as well as communications and knowledge and information. You and I would have gone back, if we went back 20 years ago and wanted to buy a GPS, an HD video camera, an HD camera, a library of 1,000 books, a music library, video games, medical diagnostics, educational capability, we would have probably spent hundreds of thousands of dollars accumulating all of that stuff. Today, it's free on your smartphone. So people in Africa skipped that entire generation of buying all of that stuff. It's demonetized and dematerialized into your cell phone. Do you carry GPS around or an HD camera or video camera? I don't. It's in my cell phone. It's free. It's there. This
dematerialization that you talked about is really a crucial piece, because I know that another thing that people see as a limiting factor is, you said they're going to be buying American stuff. Well, do we need more stuff? Can we afford more stuff? Do they have the resources or the waste disposal for stuff? But one thing that's happening is this dematerialization. I remember Buckminster Fuller talked about this, what are we saying, 40, 50 years ago, that as we are able to satisfy our needs with much less material, much less energy, that is another game changer.
Yeah, it's, it really is a transformative thought that what you desire and need can, I have to say, we live in a crazy, incredible world. I was driving home late one night. I needed a cup of coffee, and I was like, I wish it was a Starbucks. Usually there's a Starbucks every place I look. And I said, I bet you there's an app I can download to find the local Starbucks. So at a red light, I went and downloaded an app and found the Starbucks, 5 blocks from me. I would have never gone there otherwise, and I was there. So literally, you can get the knowledge and information or things you need in the same way that we're living in a world of transformative knowledge and applications. The other technology I write about in Abundance that's coming online is 3D manufacturing, 3D printing.
Now, this one, Peter, may be new to a lot of people.
Yeah, so let me take a second to talk about, because it's something you should know about. It's the closest equivalent is the replicator on Star Trek. Where you go up to the thing and you say, make me something, and it takes an information file in the computer at Star Trek, and it converts that information to matter in front of your eyes, and you have your mug of coffee or your steak or whatever it is you ordered on this.
Yes, from wish to idea to communication to matter
in front of you. Well, all of us are familiar with being on your computer, and you have a Word file of a letter you just wrote, and you hit print, and out of your printer comes a piece of paper with a very thin layer of black ink that was deposited on the white piece of paper to make a very one-dimensional document of white paper and black ink. Imagine if you could you go to your computer and you design a three-dimensional thing, a sculpture. It could be a piece of jewelry. It could be, in some cases, what it's being used now by dentists for teeth. And you hit print, and what happens is that a 3D printer actually deposits layer after layer, 1/100th of an inch, and it builds from the ground up a three-dimensional structure where it deposits material only where that structure is. And you're able to literally print a three-dimensional structure out of metal, out of plastic, out of rubber, even out of human cells. Or there are teams developing 3D printed organs, kidneys, and so forth, where a very complex structure is built specifically to your design. So it's personalized production. You can imagine 3D printed clothing where you look at the piece of clothing you want, and it's printed in your closet.
Now,
amazing
where
stuff.
I have been reading about this for probably 10 years.
Yeah.
Where are we now? What is actually happening today? What happens in the next 2-3 years?
So where we are today is the technology exists for dentists are using it to print teeth, or jewelry designers are using it to print metal, gold, silver jewelry. People are printing prosthetic limbs. If you've lost your lower limb, they can scan. If you lost your right leg, you can scan your left leg and print a 3D working prototype, not with the muscles and so forth, but a working prosthetic that you can utilize. And we talk about this at length at Singularity University. If you go to singularityU.org, this is a university that I created with Ray Kurzweil to talk about all the exponentially growing technologies in the world, and you can learn about AI, robotics, 3D printing, and all these things. It really is incredible. There will be a point in the future where you go to Amazon, instead of having your stuff FedExed overnight, instead the device you just ordered is printed at your 3D printer in your closet or down the street.
Wow. Okay. Do you agree that the most effective way to accelerate global progress is through education, especially of women and the rights of women? And what I'm getting into now is the human software.
So I think that innovation is tied to the number of conversations going on, uninhibited conversations. It's directly a function of the number of uninhibited conversations. The idea that you and I can trade ideas, I can build on your idea, you build on my idea. It used to be in a commerce where it was a trade of things. If you had a hunk of gold and I had a watch, and we traded, now you had a watch and I had a hunk of gold. Where today, if you have an idea and I have an idea, we trade. Now you have two ideas and I have two ideas. So the work that I'm doing in Abundance and XPRIZE and SU is about giving people the potential for all of these communications, and it's about shining the light and giving voice to people on the planet. And the best way to uplift oppressed individuals, whether it's children or women, is to allow the oppression to be seen and to give them a voice. And yes, I do think that educating women around the world is probably one of the best ways to uplift society. Women have a tendency to educate their kids, to maintain family, to be focused on peaceful solutions versus warlike solutions. So it is very much a critical part of where all of this abundance of information and communications and visibility should go, and it's probably one of the most important things that we can do.
Yeah, because when you're talking about the 3 billion who will come online, I mean, what we know right now is that there are lots of places where just bringing the other half, as Nick Kristof in his wife's book called Half the Sky, that the potential for innovation and success that resides in women's voices that are not being heard yet is phenomenal.
Yeah.
What about the retrenchment, the cultural retrenchment of those in America, in the Middle East, all sorts of places that fear the future, fear change, fear even modernity? How is that going to play out in your vision?
It's interesting. We, again, going back to our neurophysiology, the way our brain work, we evolved as a species in a time when the world is best described as local and linear. So our brain evolved in a time where it was local, meaning that only the things that were within a day's walk affected you. 100,000 years ago, if something happened on the other side of the planet, you'd never know. Who cares? And then it was linear, meaning that the life of your great-grandparents, your parents, you, your kids, your grandkids, didn't change. It was the same century after century, millennia after millennia. And the brain evolved in a way that
got comfortable with that.
That was normal.
Yeah.
That was normal. And today we are in anything but. We're living in a world that's global and exponential. And we resist change. We're fearful of it. In fact, typically government and religious institutions stabilize and try and keep things the way they are, which, in many times in the past was an important thing. But the fact of the matter is that the world is changing. It's changing very rapidly. And a lot of people resist the change, but then when they get used to it, they don't want to give it up. My parents, many people probably in their who didn't grow up with computers, email and cell phones were something, and GPS was something that, I don't need that stuff. I know where I'm driving.
I've gotten along fine. Yeah.
Fine. But now try and take that away from somebody, and it's like, no way, So we resist, and then we finally, when forced, start utilizing it, and then we establish our new norm. The difference is that the rate of innovation is increasing. And where this is going to cause troubles more than any place else is our ability to regulate it. Because there's one thing that can't keep up with the rate of change, it's going to be government regulations. And so,
In a way, and let's see what you think, in a way, that's somewhat what happened with the financial crisis. Yeah. Was that the credit default swaps and the derivatives and the algorithms got way out beyond regulation, and suddenly things that could have enormous impact on the entire globe were happening outside the basketball court.
Well, I guess it's not my area of expertise. I'll use a different example, which is that, we have this $10 million Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize that is going to, hopefully within the next 4 years, going to generate a set of devices that are consumer handheld devices that can diagnose you better than a group of board-certified doctors. So what happens when your iPhone becomes a diagnostic device? Well, today it becomes regulated by the FDA. And the process of getting something approved by the FDA is a long, drawn-out process. So what ultimately happens is the device doesn't happen here. It gets launched in places around the world that don't have regulations like this. So, I half serious, half joking talk about the notion that Africa will have better health care than the United States in 20 years. Because the risky devices that really are transformative and breakthroughs will be launched there first.
Well, it's almost leapfrogging again, isn't it?
It is leapfrogging.
In other words, where we have wires filling a country and they skip that, we have regulations filling a country, they'll skip that. They won't have to perfect what we're doing now, they'll skip it.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, one of the most exciting ideas in the book is the explanation at the very top about why we don't notice the good news, why we don't see it, and as you said, it's wiring, brain wiring. If that is so potent, is there enough going on to handle that issue? In other words, are we learning enough in brain science? Are we getting good enough that we'll be able to overcome these evolution's, legacy?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, one of the reasons that I wrote the book, it's like, magic acts take advantage of your cognitive biases, the wiring of your brain to miss how something happens. And, you can watch a magic act 1,000 times, and if you don't know how it works, you're fooled by it every time. Then someone shows you how it works, and then you catch it every time, and you see what's happening. So my goal with Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think, my book is to have people see this, give them visibility in what's going on, show them the evidence for abundance so that you can see the good news, and you can shine light on the pessimism where it's not appropriate.
Right. That's Peter Diamandis. We're talking about his book, as he just said, The Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think. You can learn more at diamandis.com and abundancethebook.com. The book has a fairly brief appendix, Dangers of the Exponentials, in which you look at bioterrorism, cybercrime, robotics, AI, unemployment. And you note Bill Joy's famous Wired cover story from April 2000. I had him right in his studio when that thing came out, which was Why the Future Doesn't Need Us, in which Bill Joy, one of the founders of Sun Microsystems, one of the geniuses of that whole Wired world, suggests, I'm going to quote him, that we limit development of the technologies that are too dangerous. And what he was saying was that unlike even nuclear weapons that took, he said nuclear weapons, at least you really needed to have a lot of money and a lot of stuff to make them happen, whereas some of these exponential technologies might be much easier for something bad to happen. You conclude that the limits he suggested won't happen, wouldn't work. How do you handle that whole area?
Yeah, so let's parse this. Bill is brilliant. I have tremendous respect for him. He's a friend. He's now a top venture capitalist at Kleiner Perkins in Silicon Valley. And I interviewed him at some length for this book. And here's the issue. I don't believe it is possible to regulate away innovation. I think that we live in a global economy where national boundaries are porous, that like we did in the Bush 43 administration, we put a stop on stem cell research. All we did in the United States was lose the lead we have, and all of the researchers and the breakthroughs went to South Korea and China and other parts of Europe. So that's going to happen over and over again. If we say you can't do nanotechnology or AI research, people who are passionate about that are just going to move someplace else. They're just going to, the knowledge is out there. You can't bottle it up. The second point I make in the book is that the problems that we're going to have, and there's no question we're going to have this technology used for evil. Statistically speaking, if you look at the ratio of computer positive software versus malware, it's like 10,000 to 1. If you look at the number of positive things that Craigslist is used for versus negative things, it's like 10,000 to 1. I am an optimist and believe in the goodness of human nature, and that drives me forward. But history has given credence to that belief. But as people start to use synthetic biology or AI or nanomaterials, whatever it is, for negative, I don't want to be limiting the technology innovators have here to address those problems, because I'm going to need the most advanced technology possible to catch the terrorists before they do anything. And I want that technology being developed by the smartest entrepreneurs and the top people in the labs here in the United States.
So, in other words, it won't be limited. It's like we're just going to have to be nimble. We're going to have to be wise. We're going to...
Yeah, I mean, listen, all of us, how many people on the air here, you might be caught by a computer virus once every couple of years. It's been by 4 or 5 years since I have. There are millions of computer viruses out there. But we are keeping ahead of that with all of the antiviral software that's out there. And I think we can do the same, watching out for anti-real viruses or anti-terrorist activities. People talk about, that we're losing our privacy, and we are. We are losing privacy to a great degree. Is that a downside? Sure. But there's also an upside to that. The fact that we're losing privacy means that it's harder and harder for someone in the world to do you harm, because they can't do it in a vacuum. They can't be buying.
They can't get away with it.
They can't get away with it, and it means they can't oppress people in the developing world, and they can't be buying, synthetic biology equipment or potassium perchlorate or whatever it is they're going to do harm with.
Okay. Again, the book is Abundance. The Future is Better Than You Think. The websites are Diamandis.com and AbundanceTheBook.com. You can listen to this week's conversation and many others anytime during the week by listening to the podcast. You can sign up to have it delivered to you weekly. You can do both of those things at my website, TerenceMcNally.net, or aworldthatjustmightwork.com, or at iTunes. You can also sign up at my site or by emailing me at TEMcNally, TEMCNALLY, at mac.com. And finally, thank you to Peter Diamandis. Keep up the good work.
My pleasure. Great to be here.